fall powwow that we receive close to 4,000 of our closest relatives this year. I'm really grateful to be here, to be invited to open up this space in a good way and remind everyone to be a good relative and a good steward of this land. So with your permission, I'm going to begin. If you are able to stand, please do so as we honor the space and the place that we're about to do some amazing work in. So before starting, I want to honor the people of this land that allow me, personally, to continue practicing my traditions. The Yalamu Ramatu Shaloni people of this land. And I want to offer some tobacco, and I'm going to place it on the stage as an offering and as thank you for allowing us to continue at least my practices. Ometel. Now, if you will join me in my tradition, which is the Mexica tradition. Some people know it as Aztec. But I started doing this work through my Maestra Elena Avila. She was a registered mental health nurse that turned curandera and practiced curanderia for the rest of her life. And so a lot of the ways that I honor the directions, which we're going to do next, is in a healing way, and in a way that if we need to honor or pray or do some work in that particular direction, I invite you to do so. So if we would join me, we're always going to be turning to the direction of our heart, and that's the direction, that's to the left side. So if you accompany me in turning, doing one turn as we open the prayer, and we're going to look to that corner over there, because apparently, according to my Google map, that is the east. Yeah, she's very modern. And so in the direction of the east, Ometeotzin, Tlazocamatli, we honor the direction of the sacred masculine that we all possess. Not that toxic masculinity stuff, the masculine energy that allows us to nurture, to move forward, to continue doing the work that is important in our communities. This is the direction of new beginnings as well. So if you are looking into new projects, into new relationships, and new opportunities, this is the direction to pray to. Ometeotzin, Lazocamatli. Omete. And we turn to the left, and we're going to be turning to that corner. That corner is the direction of the west. In the west is the sacred energy of the feminine that is in all of us, the sacredness, the moving forward, the nurturing, the challenging. The warrior women, the trans women belong in this direction. We honor this direction and ask for guidance and protection and nurturing, and also freedom from all the responsibilities that get bestowed upon this direction. This is the direction of also recent teachings. So if you are still wondering what that teaching was, pray to this direction. Ask for guidance from the energies of this direction. Ometeotzin, Tlazocamatli. And we keep on turning. We're going to pass the south, and we're going to go all the way to the north. The north is in that direction over there. And in this direction, we honor our ancestors. We honor the transcestors. We honor all their teachings and all their misgivings, because unfortunately, they were just doing their best. This is the direction that we pray to bring some closure or some clarity or connect to our ancestors, our transcestors, people that have recently left us, and we still want to connect in one way or another. Ometeotzin, laso kamatlime. And we continue turning to the direction of the south, and that's the southern direction. In the south, we honor the direction of the children, of our inner child. We honor this direction as it holds the power of love, the power of innocence, the power of imagination. We pray to this direction if we still need to resolve some issues from our childhood. For a lot of us, this was a difficult space to hold. And so we need to continue taking care of that inner child. Ometeotzin, laso kamatlime. And we continue turning. We do a full turn. And we look up. We look up into the skies, into the universe, into everything that is known and unknown, and remind ourselves that we are star children. We are children of the stars, and we, believe it or not, we're not the center of the universe. We belong to a greater whole. We pray to the sun. We pray to the moon. We pray to the stars and all the planets that keeps us in place. And we acknowledge that this is just one of many, many, many universes. Ometeotzin, laso kamatlime. And last but not least, we do one final turn, and we ground ourselves. If you are able to, touch the ground. Whenever you feel out of place or out of touch or out of sorts, bury your hand or bury your foot inside the dirt. Reconnect to what gave us life, because we're going to be returning to it, believe it or not. And we have a sacred responsibility to take care of it, to nurture it, to stop destroying it. We ask for forgiveness for all the damage that we have done. Ometeotzin, laso kamatlime. And one final turn, because we need to center ourselves. And in the center is where we all connect. We connect with all the energies. We connect with all that is here with us. And we connect with the spirit world. Thank you so much for allowing me to be of service in this capacity. And this is just one of the many ways that we can show up for community. Ometeotzin, laso kamatlime. Thank you very much.
Hello, and welcome to the San Francisco Pride inaugural Human Rights Summit. I'm Michelle Miao. Some of you know me as a previous board president of San Francisco Pride, in which I feel very honored to have been able to serve for multiple years and to live to see another day and tell stories about, those moments and times and experiences. And some of you know me here at the Commonwealth Club as producer and host of a program that is your A through Z, covering the LGBT, LMNOP, and everyone in between. I'm going to use the word honored again. I know we hear it all the time, but truly, authentically, I feel so honored to be a part of this year's very first inaugural Human Rights Summit. Executive Director of San Francisco Pride, Suzanne Ford, called me one day and said, WTF is going on in this country? We need to do something. I mean, we know to march, we know to protest, we throw this thing called Pride, San Francisco Pride. But I feel like we need to do something more, something deeper, bring people here to this city that people once felt was a sanctuary, a safe place for LGBTQIA plus people to live, to visit, to be with their friends and their family. So we came up with this idea of the summit. Bring our activists, our advocates, our community members from different parts of the world, different parts of the country, soon the world, well, yeah, start baby steps. Bring us all together and have these deep conversations. We have to do something. It's a critical moment in time right now for LGBTQIA plus people. And so I'm happy that you are all here joining us, whether in person or online. What we want out of this is to come together knowing that we have each other and that we have resources and that we are fighting back. Some housekeeping items here at the Commonwealth Club. Any restrooms you see out there are gender neutral. Use whichever restroom you like. There are single stall restrooms up on the 3rd floor, so just head to the elevator there, hit the 3rd floor button, and they are to your left. It is an all-day program, and so we have our first panel that starts at 10 o'clock. There are 2 panels that are happening right at 10 o'clock here, one here in the Toby Auditorium, and we're also using the lower level auditorium, which is called Rembe Room. So I will let you know throughout the day which panels are taking place and you could choose. We do have a special lunch program as well and a special performance, so we hope you stay throughout the entire day. Most importantly, we want you to feel safe, we want you to feel healthy, we want you to feel supported. So if you need a moment, got to take a phone call, got to take a break or even a breather, you're free to use any space here in the building, except maybe the offices on the 3rd floor. But there is a beautiful rooftop. If you hit the elevator again to the rooftop, there is a Zen garden. I encourage you to get some fresh air if you need it. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Board President of San Francisco Pride, Nguyen Pham. Do you want the podium?
Thank you so much, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nguyen Pham. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm proud to be addressing you today as the first Vietnamese president of the world's greatest queer celebration in the world's most beautiful city, San Francisco Pride. Again, welcome to the inaugural SF Pride Human Rights Summit. Our theme this year for SF Pride 2023 is looking back and moving forward. And we are doing both of those things to grand scale this celebration. This is our 53rd year of operation and existence, which is a wealth of lived experience and history and knowledge. So we're definitely looking back and reflecting on all of that. Equally, we're moving things forward. Today, we're excited to share with you those who are on the front lines and leading edge of LGBTQ plus advocacy, activism, our champions, and our luminaries. And we are very excited to share all of their insights and their learnings with you and engage in dialogue and in community with all of you. Thank you so, so much for making the choice to show up and be here with us. Again, welcome to the very first ever, but not the last, San Francisco Pride Human Rights Summit. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you at the speaker sessions. Thank you so much. And now it is my honor to introduce to you the woman who does it all, and technically the first person I ever hired at SF Pride, the one and only Executive Director of SF Pride, Suzanne Ford.
picture of it just kills me. Can you imagine if you were 10 years old and you went to your parents, you'd been presenting as a boy, and you said, I'm really a girl, and you were insistent about it. And your parents took you to a psychologist, to the doctors, and you were persistent and said, that's who I am. And then you went to school and presented female, and people probably knew that you were trans. Can you imagine facing hate from your classmates, from school board meetings where they were talking about your existence, when they were talking about you using the bathroom, where they were talking about you couldn't play girls' basketball? Can you imagine the courage that that 10-year-old had already displayed? I can imagine that because I didn't have the courage to do what she has done. And there are thousands of those kids in red states and those families. And I'm here to say that we're not going to take that. We're going to do something about it. So we're going to start here today with this, and we're going to walk before we run. But I promise you that this event is going to keep continuing. It's going to get bigger, and we're going to get louder, and we're going to have more media here. I would like to introduce the main speaker this morning. Imani is the executive director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and she is the speaker that I heard at that donor meeting. Every time I hear her, I know that I'm not as eloquent, and every time I see her, I say to myself, there is a powerful black woman, and I really appreciate her. So please come up, Imani.
Suzanne, thank you so much for that generous introduction. And every time I hear you speak, and I'm so thrilled to be in movement with you. You're a phenomenal leader. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for joining us. My name's Imani Rupert-Gordon. I'm the executive director for the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. NCLR is a national legal organization, and we work to achieve civil and human rights for all LGBTQ people and our families. And we do that through litigation, legislation, public policy, and public education. Now, to get started, I'm going to tell you a bit about what we do at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, because I know there's some folks that aren't as familiar with our work, but I want to talk about what we do and how we do our work. So first, NCLR is not new to this. We were created 46 years ago, and we were created by queer women that didn't see themselves or their needs represented in what was then known as the gay rights movement. The gay rights movement, or the LGBTQ movement, that really was the gay rights movement, really didn't center the needs of these women. But that was also true in other movements. And the women's rights movement also weren't serving the needs of these women. And so NCLR was created to fill a gap. It was created to be inclusive and intersectional at a time before that word was actually coined. So in those early years, the vast majority of our cases were supporting women who were leaving their relationships with men and starting relationships with women and wanted to maintain custody of their kids. And so at this time, there was no support there. And so much of NCLR's early work really was around custody and around parentage. And so something interesting came from that, and that is the laws that we helped to create to establish these precedents to protect women to help maintain custody of their kids are the same laws that protected all families. LGBTQ families are not. So whenever we see laws supporting names on birth certificates that include same-gender parents, or birth certificates that include more than two parents, or when we see protections for surrogates or people that are using surrogates, this is some of NCLR's earliest work. And this serves as a reminder that by supporting the most underrepresented, that everyone is stronger, that we're all brought up that way. LGBTQ people and non-LGBTQ people alike are protected, and our families are better off. And it's because of this early work. So when I think about NCLR, I think about us as an organization that was created to fill gaps. It's our work to support everyone across the LGBTQ spectrum and beyond. We widen our tent and create equity for everyone. And we're thinking heavily about this right now because in this country and across the world, LGBTQ people are in the fight for our lives. For the last several years, we've seen an increase in anti-LGBTQ bills. And this has been something that has been enormously scary for our community. This is alarming because there's a ridiculous number of bills. And secondly, these bills are disproportionately impacting transgender young people, a tactic that is incredibly dangerous, and it's just honestly cruel. And finally, there's an attack on education and what this is going to do for us long term. And I want to spend some time with that because all of these things are related and we need to treat them that way. So whenever we speak about the oppression of LGBTQ people, we're talking about the number of anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced. And that matters, but what really is important here is the context that that's existing in. And it's important that we talk about why that's happening and why it's happening now. Because this is really a case of it's not what they're doing, but it's how they're doing it. So as a point of reference, in 2015, there were just over 100 anti-LGBTQ bills that are introduced. And today, that number is exponentially more at 650 anti-LGBTQ bills, and that's in 2023 alone. The strategy is not a sophisticated one, but it's effective, and that is simply introduce more bills than we can successfully challenge. And when we think about who's litigating these cases right now, we know that that's not hard to count because the vast majority of these bills and these bills that are becoming laws, they're being challenged by LGBTQ organizations and exclusively by LGBTQ organization legal groups. There's certainly help from pro bono groups and we get some help outside, but by and large, the horrific laws are being challenged by the same groups. Now, there's a benefit here because there is a strategy that we have. There is an expertise, the LGBTQ organizations, that is helpful, and it's helped us be successful in the bills that we're able to challenge. But we're handling as many cases as we can, and we're still not able to keep up with all of these bans. Right now, in states across this country, there are 20 medical bans for transgender health care. And as a movement, all of the organizations, we've been able to challenge 12 of them. Currently, there are 21 sports bans, and as a movement, we've challenged 6. There's 9 Don't Say Gay or Trans bills, and we've been able to challenge 1 of those. And of the 8 bathroom bills, those are still happening, y'all, and none of those have been challenged. And so we're seeing this right now because we don't have a collective understanding of intersectionality. That is something that is missing in this moment, and it has never been more important than it is now. We have to understand that these challenges are and will affect all of us. And when we're talking about intersectionality, we're not always talking about the same thing. So I want to provide some context here because what we should be doing is thinking about this from an intersectional perspective. But we have to know that what we're talking about. And I mention this because there is a structural component to intersectionality that's often missed when we just throw that word around. So when we talk about intersectionality, often we're talking about issues of public health and anthropology and sociology, but Kimberly Crenshaw, the person that coined this term, she was an attorney. She was an attorney by trade, and her perspective and analysis came from that. And I'm going to spend some time with this right now because I want you to be able to think about this and how we can apply this in our real life in the ways that it was meant to be applied and not just a word that we throw around. So, in the 1970s, there was a Black woman named Imani Rupert-Gordon, and along with 4 other Black women, they claimed that they were being discriminated against in their place of employment, which was General Motors, and this was because they identified as Black women. Specifically, of the 155 Black women that were employed at General Motors, all but 1 of them was laid off. And there were employment discrimination protections in place during this time that would protect for both race and for gender. So DeGraff and Reed and the other 4 women, when they went into this, they actually didn't think that they had anything to worry about. They didn't think it was possible to lose this case. When DeGraff and Reed got to court, her employer explained that General Motors couldn't possibly be discriminatory. They explained that they hire Black people and they hire women, so they couldn't be discriminating on the basis of race or on gender. And now it was true that General Motors did employ Black people and did employ women. But what they failed to acknowledge was that they had a particular hiring practice. And that was that the Black people that they hired were all men. And this was to do mechanical work and to work on an assembly line. And the women they hired were all white. And this was to do admin work or the public-facing positions. So because they had this hiring practice specifically for Black women, by design, because they had this hiring practice that was specifically for women, Black people weren't part of that. And so in the end of all of this, they realized that, well, actually, I'm going to give you some of the backstory first. So this is actually, I'm going to spend some time with this, y'all. So I want you to remember this far after you forget me. So this is what they don't tell you in the Cliff's Notes version, and that is that before 1970, in state laws in Missouri, women weren't allowed to work more than 9 hours a day. And so for this reason, General Motors, but other folks wouldn't employ women in particular areas of their company. General Motors, probably because on an assembly line, women wouldn't, if someone had to work overtime, then women would have to leave. This transition could be a problem. But it could be destructive. But in other parts of the company where they would hire women, in theory, they would hire Black women, but in actuality, there was only the one Black woman that I mentioned earlier, and that woman was employed not in a public-facing position, but she was employed as a janitor. And all the other positions that were held by women were held by white women. And so when the laws changed in 1970, they began hiring women in all parts of the company, and this included Black women. And so by 1973, General Motors had hired the 155 Black women of the around 8,500 employees. And so when they had layoffs that next year, the last ones hired were the first ones fired. And so because of that, the Black women were among the first people to go. And so it was because of their practice specifically for Black women, for women and for Black women in particular, by design, because they were hired later, they were fired first. And so in the end of all of this, the judge ruled that it was unfair for DeGraff and Reed to sue on the basis of both gender and on race, when Black men couldn't claim discrimination based on gender or race, and white women couldn't claim discrimination on the basis of gender or race. And so the judge determined that DeGraff and Reed and the four women were trying to do something special, and that they wanted special treatment is how they talked about that. But the thing is, these Black men and these white women didn't need protections on the basis of both race and gender. This was something that was specifically felt by Black women. And because they were experiencing discrimination and experiencing simultaneously. And so because of this, it was a special type of sexism and a special type of racism that was exclusively felt by Black women. And the court failed to recognize that this was a systemic discrimination that DeGraff and Reed faced. Or if we talk about that more simply, it's someone that would fall at the intersections. So we are left to wonder that during a time that we actually have employment protections, how is it possible that someone could experience that discrimination? And what was true then is actually also true now, and that is that when our systems are created without consideration for how they take care of all of us, how they can protect all of us, especially those of us from underrepresented identities, because we're thought of as an afterthought, then we're going to experience it that way. And so in this scenario, employment protections, they failed at the only thing that employment protections are supposed to do. And this is because they were never designed to support someone like M. DeGraff and Reed and the people that were in this lawsuit with her. And so when it came down to it, it worked exactly as it meant to, and it didn't support her. But we're talking about specifically how these identities interact with systems, and how these systems fail when they work as intended, but they don't consider the most underrepresented populations. And so this has structural implications because of how these issues are interpreted by the court. And so Kimberly Crenshaw says it like this. She says, if we aren't intersectional, some of us, the most vulnerable, are going to fall through the cracks. Because this is a concept that we can apply to all of our identities. We have to see these discriminatory anti-LGBTQ bills as what they are, as an attempt to divide the LGBTQ community and hurt the most vulnerable among us, and then continue to hurt everyone. So our opponents are expecting us to ignore the fact that in this moment, LGBTQ people are falling through the cracks. They're hoping that we don't recognize that this is something that hurts all of us. And so if Kimberly Crenshaw has taught us anything, it's that we have to see that discrimination hurts everyone that we're all vulnerable when democracy and equity don't exist. We have to see these bills as an attack on all of us. Freedom is not something that's finite. It's better and it's stronger when we all have it, and we have to treat it that way. Right now, NCLR and LGBTQ litigation groups are handling as many cases as we can, but there are so many cases out there. Last year, even though there was a record number of anti-LGBTQ bills, only 9% of those became law. And we believe, once again, that we can keep that number on the relatively low side if we have support from non-LGBTQ folks. Because even being outmatched, we've been incredibly successful. But given the number of bills we're up against, it's not sustainable without support there. And so for folks living in these states where these are passing, it's devastating, and that's something that we have to end. We need help from our non-LGBTQ counterparts. We need intersectional thinking that includes LGBTQ people. We have to see this as a fight that we are all in, and we're all in together, and we especially need that in this moment. And our opponents are hoping that we never figure that out. And if we are truly going to embody intersectional thinking, we have to see our movements as together, our movements as one. Bayard Rustin once said, "We have to be in every other movement for the freedom of people." It's okay. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay. We're getting to freedom. We're getting to freedom for that young person. And let's remember that these anti-LGBTQ bills are all related. There are some folks that are talking about these bills like they're different. Healthcare bans and sports bans and the Don't Say Gay or Trans bills, as well as things like affirmative action and voting laws and the book bans on people of color. We have to recognize that these bills are working together. It's a reminder to us that this is not about kids. It's not about protecting kids. It's hurting kids. This is about dividing us and having us self-censor ourselves and making discrimination sound less horrible than it is. But again, it's not just what they're doing, it's how they're doing it. For the last 50 years, our opponents have been trying to work to overturn Roe in this country, making abortion illegal. It started by adding limitations to abortion and making small incremental changes. And then last year in the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court overturned the constitutionally protected right to abortion. And so we see what's happening. We are in a place right now where politicians, not doctors, are making decisions about health care, and it's confusing to think about how we got here. One of the reasons is that the Don't Say Gay or Trans laws are so dangerous is because they are intentionally vague. Teachers are afraid to talk about their LGBTQ identity, and this is our case. I said before, of the 9 Don't Say Gay or Trans laws that have been introduced, the NCLR has challenged the one that all of our movements have. But we hear from teachers that they are afraid to talk about who they are as LGBTQ people. They're afraid to have a picture of their spouse on their desk. They're taking down pictures of prominent LGBTQ people, and they're refusing to sponsor GSAs or gender and sexuality alliances. And so they're doing it because they're not really clear on what you can be fined for, and that's intentional. They want us to be afraid to be who we are, to not quite know, but to think that there's a little part of us that's not quite okay, and they want to put that in at every single level. But there's a connection here that's important, and that is around education. It's about whose history is taught and what the consequence is when we do that. So we have to acknowledge that we hear the same historical figures and the same life-changing events over and over again. That reinforces their importance to us. We know these things are important because we continuously hear about them. But it works the other way as well, and that is when we don't hear about the history and contributions of some people and some communities, it's not neutral. We don't just learn about it later and it all works out in the end. This teaches students that LGBTQ history doesn't exist. LGBTQ people feel like outsiders, but they also think that LGBTQ people don't exist and they haven't done anything worthwhile. And that's something that's dangerous because it also shows that non-LGBTQ people, that LGBTQ people haven't done anything worthwhile. And when you combine this with the fact that we are banning books and eliminating histories of LGBTQ people and people of color and people that have immigrated to this country, it reinforces that idea. When we keep our identities out of school, and let's be clear, it is not all identities. They say, we are keeping sexual orientation out of school. We are keeping, so there are some people, I wouldn't be able to have a picture of my wife on my desk, but a man absolutely could have a picture of his wife on his desk. So it's not that we're banning all sexualities. And that's the part that's clear. We have to call that out. They say that it's something that it's not. They are intentionally alienating LGBTQ people. Then the students grow up believing that they're not woven into the incredible fabric that makes up this country when our contributions have been enormous. And this matters because when we see these bills moving through Congress and these bills being signed into law by governors that are keeping trans kids from playing sports or limiting the medically necessary health care, it's easier to understand how, when we look back, that the history of trans people are ignored or minimized in school. Excluding groups from our education system is the first step to normalizing discrimination. And so it's not surprising that the large majority of the anti-trans bills are aimed at kids, or aimed at parents that are supporting their trans kids or doctors that are providing this medically necessary health care that's recommended by every single medical association. Think about what would happen if kids in 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th grade, all the way up to 12th grade, grew up thinking that you couldn't say gay or trans, that you had to limit how you talked about LGBTQ people. What would happen by the time these kids became adults and they became of voting age? What would happen when they were asked to vote to support LGBTQ people after never been introduced to the positive representations of LGBTQ people in schools? Our opponents know that they can't win because this is just wrong, but let's look at what they're doing right now. Just a few weeks ago, an AP report came out that reported that the trans bills, the healthcare bills that are coming out, they're being written by a handful, by 5 radical anti-LGBTQ bills. And when they analyzed the bills, they found out that the language is the same. They're just recycling these things and getting them out to the states. These aren't coming from states. These are coming by folks with an agenda. So when we see this handful of extreme anti-LGBTQ groups churning out these bills, they're bad. They're so bad, in fact, they're being called unconstitutional by even historically anti-LGBTQ judges. And this is important to say because all of these bills that are coming out, they're not winning. When we're able to challenge them, we are winning. And that is even when we're up against bills that don't historically support LGBTQ people. And so their only hope is that we don't have an opportunity to challenge these bills. That is what they're hoping. And so when we look back at history, many of us are saying, how could this ever happen? But it's happening right now in this moment. This is what institutional discrimination looks like. And we are watching it play out right now. And so when we see these bills, we can't look at them individually. We have to understand them together, that they are chipping away at our rights. We don't want to look up in 50 years and see the clock rolled back on LGBTQ rights. They've done it before and they've done it again. And so we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention to what's happening in our education. And we need to ask ourselves, where do we want to be when we look back at our history? In this moment, where do we want to be? And so lastly, I just want to mention that we have more than our history to teach us about what we need to move forward. Our opponents are working against us, both in this country and internationally. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a list of LGBTQ hate groups in this country that also have international influence. Bigotry is something that is very easily exported, and we have to learn from countries across the world. Right now, we should all be thinking about what we can do as individuals and as a collective because all of our lives are at stake. In moments like this, it's imperative that leaders recognize what they have to offer and how they can offer it, give it freely and as often as possible. And so when the stakes are so high, it's sometimes hard to figure out how we can help and where to step in. And what we have to do is just try. And that means when Suzanne calls me, I always say yes. We make hard decisions and we make bold choices because we are going to win this. Now is the time we get to decide how we're going to show up, knowing that we're going to win. That is the kind of confidence that we are walking into. We are protecting the folks that are here now and the people that will come here in the future. Our job is harder than our opponents, but it's because our job is better than our opponents. We're legitimately the good people here. We are the people that are changing and saving the world. And we're doing that for the people in our community, and we're doing that for their community as well. I want to finish with one of my favorite authors, Maya Angelou. She said, "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better." It's been a pleasure being with you this morning. Thank you so much, and I look forward to being better with all of you.
Let's give another round of applause for Imani. Please support the work of the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Okay, so 10 o'clock, we got about 10 minutes. You can stretch, get some more coffee if you'd like. There are still plenty of bagels, get some fresh air. But right at 10 o'clock, we have two programs for you. Here in the Toby Family Auditorium Room, we're doing the anti-trans panel discussion. We have advocates and activists from Equality Utah, Sue Robbins. We also have Susan Williams, who is with the Transformation Project out of South Dakota. And we also have Nathan Broomer, who's with Equality Florida, and Dr. Alexis Petra with Trans Clinique, who provides gender-affirming care nationwide. So it'll be interesting to hear how things have been in Dr. Petra's world. I'll be moderating that panel discussion. Downstairs at 10 o'clock, we have Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, who's moderating a conversation, intergenerational panel with youth activists. So we'll kind of merge our conversations with activists who consider themselves as elders, our elders here. And so speakers include Vince Crisostomo from San Francisco